It is my pleasure to welcome you all here today for this important session. Our topic we'll be discussing is good governance needs access and inclusion. Firstly, I would like to congratulate Joe and the Cafe team on a fantastic conference so far. The session and speakers have been really enlightening and provided detailed insight in how we can make the beautiful game more accessible. My name is Owain Davies, and I'm the Chief Executive of Level Playing Field, a charity that campaigns for better access and inclusion for disabled sports fans across England and Wales. I'll be moderating the session today, and with me I have a brilliant panel to discuss this vital topic. So please may I introduce our guests. On this panel, we will speak to Facundo Penillas from the Office for the High Commissioner of the Human Rights, Karen Vandersickel from the European Commission, who will talk about the value of consulting disability NGOs, establish and elevate long-term policy and strategies. They will share some concrete examples such as the UN CRPD Article 30 and European Commission's 10-year strategy on the rights of persons with disabilities 2021 to 2030. We will also hear from Margot Chave from the Ligue de Football Professionnel. Margot is the CSR Manager and Ethics Specialist. And finally, but by no means least, we have Alex Freibel, Chair of the Bundesberichte Turnfanarbeitsgemeinschaft, or the BBAG. Hopefully I got that right, Alex, and did it justice. Germany's National Umbrella Disabled Supporters Association. Both the LFP and the BBAG are part of the Erasmus Plus project, led by Cafe, called Good Governance Needs Access and Inclusion, a project that will use disabled fan feedback to create national strategies to improve access and inclusion for disabled spectators. Like the conference throughout, if you have any questions today, please add them to the chat, and hopefully we'll have time to share that with our fantastic panel later today. For any strategy to improve access and inclusion for disabled people, to be sustainable and effective, it is vital that disabled people themselves contribute to that strategy. Put simply, decisions for disabled people made by disabled people. Just before we start, I'd like to give an overview of what Level Playing Field have done in the past 6 to 12 months, specifically around governance. As we're all aware, governance in sport sets the standards we expect. And as we've heard, the views and real-life experiences of disabled fans need to be listened to, and tangible actions need to be implemented off the back of this. Level Playing Field engages with disabled supporters associations and disabled supporters on a regular basis. We proactively reach out and host forums to talk about the experiences and look at solutions to make the game more accessible. The gathering of this user-led feedback should be the cornerstone of all good governance. We want the future where watching live sport is seamless and easy for disabled fans. If you have an impulse or desire to go and watch live sport, then that should be a possibility. The freedom to choose what you want to do, when you want to do it, should be afforded to all. This year, the British government conducted a fan-led review, a comprehensive examination of the English football system, with the aim of exploring ways to improve ownership, financial sustainability, and governance. Level Playing Field, along with disabled fans, spoke with ministers and submitted written evidence. Disabled fans' voices are imperative in delivering representative governance and understanding the whole picture of the experience of a disabled fan. Having structured communication processes and ongoing fan feedback is essential for shaping effective governance and delivering appropriate inclusion. We specifically stated that we wanted recommendations to include a set of minimum measurable accessibility standards across football, board representation for disabled fans and people, and regular and meaningful structured dialogue with disabled fans, all to ensure governance reflects the people it serves. Before we start this session, I just wanted to share an extract from a fan for the fan review. The governance of the game should represent those who own the game. Individual owners may own the clubs, but they don't own the game. If football is serious about enhancing its governance, then it has no option but to include representation from all supporters, including disabled people. Without further ado, I'd like to start with our panelists. And firstly, we have Facundo Penillas from the Office for the High Commissioner of Human Rights. Thank you very much, Facundo. And if you don't mind joining me for our first set of questions.
Hi, Owen. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Perfect. Well, we'll jump straight into it. First question I had for you is Article 30 of the UN CRPD recognises that the rights of disabled people to participate in sporting, leisure and recreational activities on an equal basis with others. My question for you really is, what does this mean in terms of state obligations to ensure disabled people can enjoy and participate in sports as spectators?
Thank you, Owen. Yeah, I mean, what we are discussing around today, and happy International Human Rights Day, it's really about the participation of persons with disabilities in every space of community life, right? And that includes, of course, sports, recreational and leisure spaces, where actually people with disabilities, as everybody else, have much better chances of engaging on community engagement and at the same time of engaging on physical activities, right? So Article 30, what really gives, it's a great approach for bringing sports into the conversation of community engagement at the larger picture. And that requires many, many things, right? It's not just talking about a person with disabilities as recipients, let's say, of certain access, but also as active engagers and active agents of change in the participation spaces, right? As you were saying, it's about having persons with disabilities not only as fans, but also as part of management, also of part of referees, also as parts of all the spaces that, in this particular case, the industry of football can offer, right? The obligations from states are kind of dual in this sense, and from a governance perspective, it's interesting to look at that, right? The first one is the states need to provide an enabling environment, right? So persons with disabilities actually can engage, and there are many, many areas that would be under government control, where government has a primary responsibility to move things forward. But then there are a number of other spaces where the main responsibility may fall on the private sector, or may fall in other kind of organizers from civil society and other structures. So in those cases, what governments should do is to guide and to provide incentives. So these changes from the private sector, from other kind of organized civil society organizations, can actually benefit from and provide a road forward that it's inclusive and that it's looking at persons with disabilities from that perspective. Critical to this is to have a lot of clarity on the strategic objectives, right? If we want to achieve and create a roadmap that will lead us to somewhere, we have to have a lot of clarity of where we want to get. And that is the road that we need to be discussing today. And hopefully what we are looking at is having 15% of all funds, all members and employees in the structures of sports structures, all target audiences that we're working for, all of that, we have to have that 15% in mind, and representation should be as clear as that.
Perfect. And I suppose kind of going on to the next point of this really is that, please can you tell me how you involve disabled people in drafting of Article 30?
Well, the convention it's a very particular treaty, right? Because it's a new generation treaty compared to other human rights treaties like the CEDAW Convention, the one on women, or the CRC Convention, the one on children. Different to those that are kind of classical non-discrimination treaties, the CRPD also is development, right? So it expands much, much more than other treaties in terms of non-discrimination, and gives a number of very consistent guidances on how to move things forward, right? And that was because of the process that led to the adoption of the convention involved persons with disabilities directly in that process. It used to say, it's very commonly said that the chair of the ad hoc committee that negotiated the treaty said that 76% of that treaty was written by persons with disabilities themselves, right? And you see that across the text, and it's I would say it's an excellent experience in terms of showing how the participation of those that are affected by this specific policy, international human rights treaty in this case, can actually make a difference in terms of reflecting the views, their views and their experiences in a document, right?
And I suppose when we, last year in its annual interactive debate and reporting on the rights of disabled people, the Human Rights Council decided to focus on Article 30. There's two parts to this. Is why was this, and what was the result of that consultation and debate?
Yeah, so we were in charge of preparing the annual debate on the rights of persons with disabilities. This is a debate that happens every year. Next year, for example, will be on data collection and statistics. And usually the council follows articles of the treaty, right? This is the way that it has been so far, because there wasn't a lot of guidance on very technical analysis in different pieces of the treaty, right? And that's why the council had decided to move that way. This may change in the future. We may have more, thematic areas that can be developed that may not be following necessarily the articles of the treaty, but that was the decision around that. And when we were drafting the report, and I was in charge of doing that, what we saw was that the area of sports cannot be disentangled from community engagement, from tourism, from many other aspects that are all describing physical activity in general terms, right? And Article 30 is a very broad article that tackles a number of different issues, including cultural aspects and so on. And it was providing this platform to bring physical activity in a comprehensive approach under the same description, right? So that's why we managed it like that. And if you look at the report is divided in three pieces. One that is looking at community inclusion and participation in community space from a physical activity point of view. The second one is on education, so physical activity in education. And the third one is on professional sports, or the sports sector itself, where it describes a little bit more. And we really wanted to give guidance on governance and strategic thinking of how to move physical activity as a strategic goal for persons with disabilities, because the numbers are terrible, right? What we see is that persons with disabilities engage much, much less in sports, and that creates a number of health risks for persons with disabilities, and that needs to change, right? We do like 1/10 of the physical activity that everybody else does, and this is putting us in a very high risk section compared to the rest of the population, right? And we have a lot to do, right? And I think everybody has a role to play in that space.
Brilliant, Facundo. Thank you very much for this, and we'll move on to our next guest. I'd like to introduce Karen Vandersickel, and if you don't mind joining me on for these questions, thank you very much. And the first question I had from you is that the 10-year strategy of the rights for disabled people recognises that accessible and inclusive sport, leisure and recreational activities are essential for full participation in society and increase the well-being of disabled people. I suppose what Facundo mentioned briefly just then. Please, could you tell us more about the role of sport in ensuring disabled people's rights, not just through playing sports, but also spectatorship, volunteering and employment?
Yes, thank you. So first, maybe to quickly introduce myself, I'm a white woman in my early 30s. I have light brown hair and a big light gray headset. And as you already said, I work for the European Commission. And in the European Commission, we have a strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities that started this year and takes up to 2030. And it's very much inspired and based on the UN Convention. So I'm really happy to speak after Facundo. So yeah, as we just heard, our idea is also very much that participating in sport and whether it is by cheering for your team, by volunteering, by working in it, or by playing it, is participating in society. And the UN Convention sets out that persons with disabilities have the same right to participate in society just like everybody else. And it is therefore the obligation of the EU and all EU countries to make that happen, because we all signed the convention, and it's up to us to make sure that this equal participation becomes reality. So the strategy is very broad. The aim is to enhance equality in all aspects of life, but for us, sport is an important aspect, even if this is an area where the EU countries have large competences. The European Commission is really ready to play its part by supporting and complementing this action that's taking place at national level. So, for instance, when it comes to attending live matches, the strategy supports the accessibility of sports events so that persons with and without disabilities can enjoy these activities together. There are also European standards. So the European standardization organizations have a technical report on spectator facilities, for instance, on like access and layout. There are European standards on the accessibility of the built environment, which also covers sport facilities. And there's accessibility standards for ICT, which are relevant for watching sports on TV or online. What I also want to mention is our Access City Award. This is an award that recognizes the work that EU cities are doing in accessibility, and it also considers sports. So just 1 week ago, we crowned our 2022 winner, Luxembourg City. And for instance, they have screens with subtitles at sport events. And I think it's also important that we do this because we've been doing this for 10 years now, and we really see that cities are doing more and more, and they are inspired by each other, and the applications keep on getting better. So it's not sufficient if the event or the stadium is accessible. You also need to manage to get there. And for this, you take perhaps public transport or you need sound signals at pedestrian crossings. So this is also something that this award takes into account. Luxembourg, they have low floor buses with ramps, for instance. And as this is a session on governance and involving persons with disabilities, I also want to say that is a very important criterion in the award. So to be a candidate for this award or to be one of our winners, having structured involvement of persons with disabilities is one of the main criterions. And then, so you just had a very interesting session here in the conference on working in sports. So here, if I may, I would also like to add a bit about this aspect. So at the EU level, we have a target that we want to have 78% of people employed by 2030. And we are already at 75% overall. But for persons with disabilities, this is 50%. So this is a huge gap. And in the evaluation of our previous strategy, it was revealed that this is really a core issue for persons with disabilities, because it helps you get the financial means you need to live independently, and it can help to live a fulfilling life. So we already have EU rules. So we have the Employment Equality Directive, which is prohibiting discrimination and is requiring reasonable accommodation. but it's clear that this is not enough. So in our new strategy, we will do more. Next year, we will publish a package to improve labor market outcomes of persons with disabilities, and this is now being developed together also with persons with disabilities and their organizations, and as well as social partners and public employment services. And we will also be monitoring the disability employment gap.
And I suppose when you're speaking about the strategy, and obviously we spoke about at the beginning, is that decisions for disabled people made by disabled people. Is that, how did you involve disabled people in the drafting of the strategy?
We had a very large consultation process, internally and externally. And in the external consultations, we consulted civil society, including in particular those representing persons with disabilities, but also, of course, the European Parliament, Member States, Committee of the Regions, the European Economic and Social Committee, the Ombudsman, the Fundamental Rights Agency, and the general public. And so as part of this, we very actively consulted persons with disabilities and their representatives also in sport. So for instance, Chaves participated in one of our consultation rounds. We also have this annual conference on the European Day of Persons with Disabilities. And towards the end of our previous strategy, we also there talked very thoroughly about the challenges that persons with disabilities experience in sport. So at this conference, we gather persons with disabilities and their organizations together with policymakers and experts. So this, of course, also fed into the new strategy. And for sure, it doesn't stop here, because in the years to come, we will develop the relevant initiatives, and the involvement of persons with disabilities in sport will continue to be very important in that.
Wonderful. And just kind of going on to the next question is, how does the Commission support the implementation of the UN CRPD Article 30 within Europe?
Mm-hmm. So one of our first initiatives is to do a study on how it's going now, to evaluate the implementation, and the objective here is to support EU countries to increase support and participation of persons with disabilities, including in sports, as part of which is part of the article. What we are also doing is cooperating with both mainstream and disability-specific sports organizations at all levels, including through programs such as Erasmus Plus, which we will hear a bit more about in this session too. We are partnering with the International Paralympic Committee to foster inclusion, combat stereotypes, for instance, through their current communication campaign on this. And what I would also like to mention here is the European Disability Card. So this is a card for the EU, which makes it easier to attend sport events abroad. Because the problem is that there is currently no mutual recognition of disability status across countries, which makes it difficult to go and attend live matches abroad. So we worked with persons with disabilities and their representatives to create such a card. It's currently used in 8 countries. And by the end of 2023, we will propose a card for all EU countries. So this will make it easier to get the right support when you travel to another country to go and attend a match or an event. And what it does, it ensures the same access as nationals to benefits in culture, leisure, sport, and transport. We also, of course, I quickly touched upon it. We also have our EU funds, so we are putting our money behind our actions. And Erasmus Plus is a very big and important program on sport. But then we also have the European Social Fund Plus, which can train sports staff, and the European Regional Development Fund, which can support accessibility in sport infrastructure. And then we are raising awareness. For instance, next year we will do an awareness raising campaign on our strategy. We are working together also with organizations in developing it, and sport will be part of it. There is a new initiative, Healthy Lifestyle for All, and to reward grassroots sport organizations that are already doing great work. We also have a specific award, the Be Inclusive EU Sports Award. So this is a few angles what we're doing through policy, through funds, through recognition and awareness.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Karen. We're starting to get some questions coming in for Karen and the other panelists as well. So please continue to drop those into the chat box. Thank you very much, Karen. We're going to move over now on to speak to Margot and Alexander. As mentioned, CAFE is currently running the Erasmus Plus project called Good Governance Needs Access and Inclusion. Margot, please could you tell us more about the project and why the LFP decided to get involved?
Of course. Thank you, Owain. While I was preparing for this intervention, I read on the CAFE website just a reminder that 50% of disabled people in Europe have never attended a public or sporting event. And when they did came in a football stadium, 80% of them have experienced discrimination. So we know we have a lot of work to do. And to ensure a truly accessible environment for all, one where disabled people can take their rightful place in the game, as you were saying, Owain, it is vital that access and inclusion of disabled people is integrated into sports governing body core strategies. And that's where this Erasmus program is about, Erasmus Plus. So to do so, we aim to create a platform for increased exchange and understanding and more collaboration between us. There is the National Disabled Supporter Association, who play a crucial role in empowering disabled people to act as self-advocates, and you will hear more with Alexander just after me. They are the National Association also, and the National League. All of us working together around CAFE as well, and this from 3 different countries. So we have the National Association and leagues in Belgium, KBVB and Pro League. In France, the FFF and the LFP, which is me, and in Germany, DFB and DFL, as well as the National Disabled Supporter Association from each of these countries, Inter, FFS-FH for France, and BBAG for Germany. I won't try and pronounce the full name. Also, there is a Universidad Europeia from Portugal, which is helping us with all the scientific inputs. And altogether, we are working toward this good governance in sport project. We have defined several objectives of this project, and we have agreed upon different activities to be implemented. The first one we can talk about is the survey. The first survey was deployed this November. And we asked a lot of questions to include the complete fan experience of disabled person. It went from ticketing to transport, to food, seats, security. And all the fans were asked what was important to them and if they were satisfied about these items in their recent experience in stadiums. And the aim of this first survey was to provide an in-depth understanding of the current status of accessible and inclusive services at stadium in each of our 3 countries, and to identify the barriers that disabled persons can face when they come to the stadiums. The idea was to give the opportunity to disabled fans to have their say and give us their feedback. So this was the first step. We're also having a workshop, all of us together, so National Association, leagues, and National Disabled Supporter Association. A workshop which will be like training workshop, stadium tours as well, on all the mentioned theme we talked about, like ticketing, match day journey, and everything, all the experience of the fans. And all of this should enable us to develop a national access strategy. First, the result of the survey, of course, which we'll sort out, and then the work together to create a long-term strategy. And the idea is to identify really the priority actions to be implemented in order to improve access and inclusion for the national leagues and the national competition as well in each country. To measure this, a follow-up survey 2 years after the first one will be conducted to estimate the progress made. So all of us working together, we will be able to do that. And when this is all over, this project should serve as a pilot to create a tested roadmap and a supporting toolkit for other national associations, other leagues, and other disabled fan groups across Europe and beyond who want to implement the same thing in their own country.
Brilliant. Thanks, Margot. And Alexander, just coming over to you, thank you for joining us. And you've been working, the BBAG has been working with the DFL and the DFB for several years. Can you tell us more about your collaboration?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much that we can join here in at first. I think not all about the people here looking know how we are and what we are doing, some facts about us. We are the German umbrella organization for football fans with different disabilities. Starts our activities in 1999. Our members are both disabled supporter groups and football clubs, and they're disabled liaison officers, most from first division, which is known as Bundesliga, to the third division and just the fourth and fifth division. Our association is run by a honorary board and still separately from any club interests, so we are free to get our meanings. We are financed by our members, of course. The German Football League help us for financing, and of course we receive donations and not irregular support of the Deutsche Fußballbund. Our main purpose is to advise these two associations in Germany, Deutsche Fußballbund and Deutsche Fußballliga, in all issues concerning disabled people. We are also lobbying on national level towards the relevant stakeholders in German politics. Furthermore, our aim is to support these clubs, both professional and non-professional, to improve their service for disabled supporters and to design their stadia more accessible. I think this is most our work. And when you say, what are you doing with the work to these two organizations? What are your highlights to work with them? We do many things. The requirement with mobile audio description units to be independent from a seat or blind partially sighted fan and the free audio signal, radio for blind football fans, of course. This is run in the Bundesliga and second Bundesliga. We are also made a guideline for audio descriptions in the stadiums. This was created with blind fans and not without them to get a perfect reporting. There's some questions to clear about the technique, and of course the audio report must be in this perfect way. The installation of displays to provide deaf fans with written match related information, it will come more and more to German stadiums. And we are working with the Deutsche Fußballbund, and we are doing an official job description for DAOs in the third league. This helps the clubs and the fans clearly to say what is the task and the benefit for a DAO. It's important that this job description is now also used in the professional Bundesliga. And so here is we are doing this description with fans who are disabled. One of our greatest milestones in the last years was in 2009. There's a German Football League who is responsible for first and second division, worked out their first recommendations for the layout of new football stadia. Due to our expertise, this recommendation became an excellent basis for further development regarding accessibility in German football. In 2007, we are just revised this, taking more into consideration all aspects of inclusion predetermined by the United Nations Conventions of the Right of Persons with Disabilities and the UEFA CAFE Guides Access to All. And now, of course, we are happy to get these results from the Erasmus poll, and of course, this is one of our next steps, the UEFA Euro 2024 in Germany, who is run in 3 years. So we're happy to work with the stakeholders here in Germany.
Wonderful, thanks, Alexander. We've got lots of questions coming in, so I'm going to jump to this question. This is for you, both you, Alexander and Margot. You both have mega sports events coming up in your countries. You have Paris 2024 Olympics, the Rugby World Cup, and the UEFA Euros 2024. Will these long-term strategies have any implication on these events? Margot, perhaps I come to you first.
Sure. First, we had huge events before, like Euro 2016, and CAFE was a big part of it with UEFA. And having worked on these international events, we have concrete legacy today in our stadiums, like audio description, for instance. And I think it also helped people understand what was the standard for an international event and how it should be accessible. So now with the Olympic Games, with the Rugby World Cup, as you were saying, and the Olympic Games coming up in a few years, accessibility will be a high priority for all sport events and all the ecosystem, like all the manufacturers of the ecosystem of sports. So that's a great push for us. And even more, with receiving the Paralympic event, you have to have your entire infrastructure accessible. So it's even one step further. And I think it really will help us with our national strategy in the Erasmus Plus project to have people engaged and get along with the project.
Alexander, have you got anything to add to that?
Yes, we are looking about these stadium things, and in Germany we have already places for blind persons with audio description, for wheelchair users and deaf person. But when I look across Europe, we don't have many times are places and seats for people who are only temporarily disabled, perhaps have a broken leg or doing this one. So I hope that more flexible seats and persons who use this should be built in stadiums. I think in England you are a little bit in the future for us. There are some flexible seats, and of course this great tournament helped us to get more focus on these things, but also on how you describe the stadium, how you take the infrastructure there, and to get easier into the stadiums with clearly a system who let us through the streets and so on.
Thank you, Alexander. We're going to go into questions. We've got 7 minutes remaining for this discussion. So Karen, the first question that I have is coming to you. So Karen mentioned the European standards, such as on layouts of accessible viewing areas, but we know that it's only a minority of stadiums that meet these. What can be done to ensure stadia comply with these standards?
Yeah, so maybe I won't be the only person replying to this question, but we have rules, we have set standards, but we know there are still gaps and there is more to do. One of the things that we will be doing as part of this new strategy is launch a resource center, Accessible EU. It will again gather everyone who has to be there, persons with disabilities, national policymakers, and the Commission, to really discuss also with architects, etc., like what are we doing, like to share the knowledge and yeah, put some peer pressure on how to improve, because we see that we have some rules, but now we have to also speed up implementation, and at the same time we are assessing the gaps to also improve on that. And I think maybe a small part of the answer is also our Accessibility Award. Sometimes stadiums are owned by the city, so there, if they can do something, that's great. And what we have also seen is that cities have started local accessibility awards, where they are doing a similar work for private organizations and shops. So things like this, they can really make a difference for people.
Thank you, Karen. And we'll go into to another question. And Facundo, perhaps I come to you for this one to start off with. Is that how can we ensure governing bodies and clubs not paying lip service for this to disabled fans, really want their involvement in high-level decision-making processes?
Well, there are a number of examples of how governance can include persons with disabilities in decision-making processes, right? Of course, the first one is to open this space very openly, right, as a decision from the organization to ensure that persons with disabilities will be represented in boards or decision-making structures, right? And there are a number of organizations that have done that in terms of opening the space and bringing them on board, many times from the same fans associations that include persons with disabilities themselves, right? The second one is to have a good consultation mechanism in the organization, right? That's maybe a less of an ambitious structure, but it will still be a good starting point, right? To start reflecting the views of persons with disabilities themselves in the processes, and of course include persons with disabilities across the decision-making process. It's particularly important. And we have seen that in many organizations. I mean, some of you actually are involved in these kind of processes. We have seen how FIFA, for example, for the World Cup next year, created a reference group of persons with disabilities that have been providing feedback on the process of building the new stadiums and moving everything in Qatar. We have seen that also in Latin America, a number of clubs have persons with disabilities represented in some structure of funds that are contributing to the processes, not only for the major sports that are maybe the ones that are making famous the organization, but also for the many other sports that those organizations are sponsoring, right? There are some organizations that have included, for example, parasports in their plans, and that itself have created the space for persons with disabilities to be part of decision-making processes, right? So I think all of these strategies can help to move representation, and definitely that would be a very important must in any strategic plan looking ahead.
Thank you, Facundo. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I'll give this one to Margot and Alexander. And I suppose really more kind of on a club level, really, is that how can we encourage clubs to consult with their disabled fans on decisions and strategies, and see that we can see some meaningful change. So, Margot, perhaps I come to you first on that, and if you've got anything to follow.
Yes, of course. I think first we need to rely on the Disability Accessibility Officer, the DAO, inside the clubs. And I think that the idea to consult regularly with the fans has to be in our national strategy, and that has to be a key action and a key indicator as well, because we have to talk about it, but maybe it should be once a year or twice a year. It should be inside our national strategy, and it should be done and with results followed up on this one.
Wonderful. Alex, have you anything short to add to that?
Yes, I think too, the DAOs are in the clubs in Germany. They should take interview to their users there. And of course, we've seen it. I think the audio description is a good example. What I say, the people and the users and the blind people, they know what is a good audio description, and they say what they want to hear. They say what they want for a technique to use, and of course they are happy when you decide with these people. I think the problem is when you just have someone in a club who say, okay, I do it on my own way, I know it better, and I don't ask my people who are sitting there, and of course who are the people we are working for. So in German structure, it's so that the DAOs should, about the rules, that the rules are that they take 1 or 2 times in year and have a discussion with their fans to get what they want to need, if it's okay, what they have, if some problems are, of course, with people there in stadiums and so on, and so they get, I think, a good view about the stadium.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you. And also there's so many questions that we have received today, but we are coming to the end of our session, and I'd like to thank everybody on our panel, Facundo first, and Karen and Margot and Alexander. Thank you for your insight and for your time. And I think there's a few takeaways from it about having that engagement with disabled people from the very top to the very bottom and throughout every level, that everybody has the buy-in into any strategy and that it's deliverable with meaningful and tangible goals, so that we can see success and we can feel that success and set the direction. And also, as Karen kind of mentioned, is working together, identifying the barriers from in the city and what that looks like for a disabled person to be able to access live sport is a really important aspect that we need to consider. Engagement with the clubs is to build that relationship, to identify the disability access officers, the people in charge of making those key decisions, and having that open dialogue, and also coming with solutions. So often in this sector and with disability, we have to innovate to drive access and to drive standards, and that's a really important factor that we need to do. So coming solution-based is really important. What I'd like to say is that is that we have a short break now, and we'll be back in 30 minutes for the next session on total access for ambulant disabled fans. So make sure you click the join button on that session. But apart from that, to everybody who's spoken today and everyone watching, thank you very much for the brilliant questions, and thank you very much for the insights from our brilliant panel. And we look forward to hopefully seeing everybody soon at a physical cafe conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.